Welcome to DC Direct. I'm Lionel Donovan. In each show, we'll be breaking down the key political stories in the U.S., but we want you to weigh in. So feel free to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at TRT World, and reach out to us with the hashtag DC Direct and be a part of the conversation. In today's show, we'll be talking about the midterm elections and how they played out. Well, the results are in and the people have spoken. 2 years after the election of President Donald Trump, Americans headed to the polls to decide who would be running the legislature. This election cycle saw lawmakers from the two big parties compete for hundreds of seats in Congress, along with dozens of governorships across the country. But the number of seats up for grabs wasn't the only memorable thing about this year's midterms. This year's elections led to some historic firsts. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the youngest woman ever elected to Congress, securing a seat in New York's 14th district. Colorado's newly elected Governor Jared Polis is the country's first openly gay man to hold the office. Somali-American Ilhan Omar and Palestinian-American Rashida Tlaib became the country's first elected Muslim congresswomen. The Democrats now hold the majority in the House of Representatives. This legislative shift destroys the monopoly the Republicans held on both the presidency and Congress. But that victory only goes so far. Republicans still have a majority in the Senate, which means Democrats won't be able to maneuver as freely as they'd like in their opposition to President Donald Trump. So how will the next 2 years in Washington look? In order to find out, we sat down with Joanne Weiner of George Washington University to talk about one of the key issues a Dem-controlled House might bring to the forefront.
Take an issue where there might be some movement is in the tax bill. The Republicans were talking about tax reform 2.0. It didn't happen until the election. But now with the Democrats in charge of tax matters, the Ways and Means, House Ways and Means is where tax bills must arise. There may be room there for them to work on how to make the tax bill better than it is. Are they going to fund infrastructure? It's a big, big expense there. I don't think anyone is ready to add another $1 trillion to the deficit. But on the other hand, there are spending needs out there, and there may be some compromise in the next couple of years in that area.
How do you think these next 2 years are going to look for Trump and just politics in general?
Well, in terms of the trends, it's clear that the Democrats did take over the House, so that means that in Washington, we're going to have a split Congress with Republicans increasing their majority in the Senate and the Democrats now controlling the House. The key thing about the Democrats taking over the House is that they can now decide what hearings will take place, and they set the agenda, as we say. So in a more bipartisan era, we might have had that happening regardless of who was in charge, but now it's pretty partisan in Washington. So the Democrats are probably looking to take a closer look at some issues that they've been unable to do so until now.
As the votes slowly came in from around the country, people stayed glued to their seats to take in the results. Some came away with the feeling that the results were a bit of a mixed bag. But regardless of the results, many voters came into these midterms well aware of what was at stake.
Outright, we're worried that Donald Trump is taking away American democracy and threatening the very concept of American democracy. We do not like having a president who lies, that it is more likely that when he opens his mouth that he lies than he tells the truth, that he only speaks to the worst instincts of the worst people in the nation and does not try to lift the nation, all of us, up to something better. And the majority of Americans are outraged. The majority of Americans are angered. The question is whether we can, when we've been gerrymandered, take back control of the House, take back control eventually of the Senate, to take back the nation for democracy.
Underneath all of the polling and campaign speeches and analysis, elections are about the voters. So let's talk to a few and hear what they've had to say about the midterms.
I feel a little good and a little bad. I had high hopes for some key races. I would have loved to take back the Senate.
I was down with a coworker of mine at Trump Hotel for the evening. We decided to to get drinks and had no idea that election day was happening because I had to absentee vote, so I didn't even make that connection. But I'm obviously really excited for these next couple of years because Trump's in the administration, and I love that.
There are a lot of issues related to housing and healthcare that previously wasn't a huge priority for the current House and Senate, and it's something that will be brought up to the surface now. So I think there's good promise.
Midterm elections are seen as a way for people to voice their feelings on how things are being run. Some bold statements were made in these elections, but with new blood in Congress and so many new governors, the question is now, how will this affect Washington moving forward? And what's in store for us as we head for 2020? Well, that's all the time we have for in today's DC Direct, but please be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at TRT World. And reach out to us with the hashtag DC Direct and let us know what you think about this year's midterms. Until next time, I'm Lionel Donovan.